Hi everyone, I'm Andrew, I'm a technology lawyer, not Josh's AI agent, but good to see we have the same dress sense, so yeah, I'm a different person. I think I've been sort of strategically positioned here just before lunch. You've had a great morning hearing all the highlights, all the great use cases of AI, and now I'm here to bring you back down to earth, burst the bubble and tell you about all the reasons why you shouldn't be using it. No, that's not going to happen. Well, I'm a technology lawyer, so in Hudson Gavin Martin, we've done a lot of advising in this space. We're using AI ourselves. We're very kind of glass half full on this stuff, but I think when we talk about AI, there are benefits and opportunities as well as risks, and that's Asa mentioned that earlier today. In terms of the game change that we've seen in the last couple of years, I think when we think about things from a legal perspective, generative AI does two things that make it a bit of a game changer from a legal perspective, and we've heard about those today. It's the creation of new content via the software, and then it's the pre-training on a whole bunch of existing material. So those two elements are what really drives a lot of the benefit from Gen AI, but also probably some of the legal issues that we're going to look at. So today is a practical guide to the legal issues around AI. I want to make it nice and practical, and so you guys are actually coming away with, I guess, some tools and some things to think about when you're implementing AI in your business. So I want to talk about when we get presented with AI use cases as lawyers, how we think about it and the sorts of questions that we're going to ask you when you come to us. The nature, I guess, and the risk of use of AI depends on the context, and the context means the use case that you're using it for, the nature of the data that's going in and then coming out, and also the nature of the tools that you're using when you roll out AI. So if you come to me as a lawyer and say, I've got this cool new AI project, these are the things that we're going to be speaking about, and we'll go through those in a bit more detail. To make things, I guess, a bit more practical again, I want to have a kind of a use case or a case study. This is fictional, by the way, but just in the back of our minds when we're thinking about these issues to bring them to life a bit. So the use case or the case study we're going to look at today is HealMe.ai. So HealMe are a telehealth provider. They've been operating for about 5 years, basically mainly in the rural community, targeting people who struggle to get to see their GP in person. Huge explosion after COVID, and now as a tech-first business, they want to take that to the next level, and they want to roll out an AI project. So this is a chatbot. Patients can upload their symptoms and basically get an instantaneous diagnosis from this chatbot. It uses OpenAI's GPT as the kind of background large language model, but is also trained on de-identified patient notes from the HealMe practice, as well as medical textbooks that they've got licenses for. They do have real doctors. They're looking over all the diagnoses to make sure that they're accurate. But because demand is outstripping supply, they want to basically see if they can just completely automate this product and not have humans in the loop. And then as an addition to that, they've got a marketing team who's working with an ad agency to use generative AI tools to create marketing content for their launch. Okay, let's keep that in the back of my mind. So the first question I will always ask if someone comes to me with an AI solution is, what's the use case? What are we using it for? What problem are you trying to solve? Which is really important. I think at this stage of the AI hype cycle, you've got a lot of hype and some solutions looking for problems. And so what we first want to understand is, what are you doing, and is AI actually the best way to solve that problem? So in this question, what's your use case for the Heal Me example, there's a few things that we need to consider there. We've got a couple of different uses of AI, obviously in the core product and then the marketing team's use case. We've got the use of a well-known large language model, OpenAI GPT 4.0 model, which is credible. It's well known in the market, but it also has some well-known risks associated with it in terms of use of data and also IP. Very sensitive information that's both going into the tool and both coming out of the tool, so we'll definitely be delving a bit more deeply into that. And then I guess the marketing use case, it seems like a less risky use, and as Justin said earlier, there's a whole bunch of use of AI in that kind of marketing context at the moment. But again, you've got the client using a third-party agency to deliver some content, and there's going to be some issues when you're using AI around ownership and IP potentially, which we'll get to. Finally, I guess with that Heal Me use case is professional and reputational risk as well, right? So these are big decisions or big outputs that are being produced by the solution, and so do we have humans in the mix? Are we kind of managing that risk as well? So key question at the outset, understanding what it is exactly that you're doing. Then the next key issue that we're going to be discussing is inputs and outputs. So when we assess AI risk as lawyers, we really want to understand what's going into the tool and then what information is it producing. In terms of the input data, that's actually two things, right? So it's how is this tool being trained? So what data is it training on? And then what data are we as an organisation allowing people to put into that tool? And we've kind of heard about a lot of that already today in terms of training data and then input data. Then in terms of the types of data that is being input into the tool and that we're worried about, obviously if it's personal information, that rings alarm bells because there's a whole bunch of legislation, Privacy Act and other issues that apply to personal information, so we're going to need to make sure that that's being protected. If it's confidential information, again, we talked about, businesses, 84% of businesses having people chucking their IP and confidential information into ChatGPT. So is that problematic? Quite possibly. And then also, if the information is proprietary, do we even have the rights that we need to input this information into the tool? And the example there with Heal Me was the medical textbooks. Actually, if you looked into their T's and C's when you signed up to the subscription, it's highly unlikely that they would have permitted you to train AI models with that information. So that's inputs. In terms of outputs, obviously what we're looking at is some of the issues that are widely discussed around AI. So this ability of AI to hallucinate really realistically at times. There's been some classic ones in the legal world. In the States, there was a case where a lawyer actually used ChatGPT to formulate some of his arguments. Unfortunately, it completely made up the cases. He didn't check the cases, and so that it was reasonably stern telling off from the judge in that case. But this is the sort of stuff we're dealing with. So understanding the limitations of what's coming out and having that human in the loop, that oversight is really important. Bias as well. Obviously, in the Heal Me example, you've got, let's just say 90% of the patients that go through that practice are male because it's a rural sector and that's the way that their patient makeup works. Then is that data going to be accurate? Is the training going to be accurate for female patients? And that's something that, again, you need that human in the loop to make sure that you're engineering out biases. And then thirdly, IP. So this is a really interesting area with AI and with generative AI in particular. There's obviously, firstly, the training data that is used by these tools. And if you have followed the media at all around generative AI and OpenAI in particular, you would have seen that there is a lot of litigation ongoing at the moment around the way that these models have been trained. And that is essentially scouring the internet for every little piece of information. There's trillions of data points that these tools have been trained on, and then spitting out the results of that. And the litigation that's on foot at the moment essentially says, well, this is like the world's biggest ever copyright infringement, right? It's like industrial scale stealing of information. Now, whether you subscribe to that theory or not, it is definitely an issue, and one way or another it's going to sort itself out. The genie's probably out of the bottle in terms of how this is evolving. However, it could be sort of like Napster and Spotify with the music industry, right? So you've got a whole bunch of sort of relatively rogue behaviour at the outset. The whole thing gets too big to fail, but actually then the commercial model changes as the litigation goes through the system. So it's really important to understand that if you're, I guess, putting all your eggs in one basket in terms of these AI models, then you have to be prepared for that commercial model to change and be on the lookout for how those things play out. Secondly, I guess, in terms of IP, is owning the outputs and what IP attaches to the output of your tool. So if you read the terms of something like OpenAI, what they will say is what we spit out based on the prompt that you put in, that's yours. However, they don't make any guarantees that there's any IP to be owned in that output. And actually what they say is, if we give you an output that's exactly the same as someone else's output, then no one owns that. And so if you're concerned about making sure that you need to own what comes out of that output, comes out of that tool, then you need to be looking really carefully at the terms and conditions of that tool to make sure that you have, firstly, that it's granting you any rights that it may have in the output, but secondly, that actually you do own the output at the end of it if that's what you want. And there's some quite complex legal, I guess, principles around whether you can actually own a computer-generated work anyway that we'll leave for another day, although feel free to hit me up over lunch if you're interested in that sort of thing. So I guess there's a lot to think about there, but I think the main theme is we're concerned with AI about both what's going in and what's coming out, and there are different issues that attach to all of those. So then the next question that we will ask is who's involved in this project? And what we mean by that is what AI systems and tools are you using? Who are the providers and what are their terms? And I guess like any technology, there are pros and cons with the various tools, and each have different vendors who kind of care about different things. In that Heal Me example, we've decided to use, by the sounds of it, OpenAI 4.0 to deliver a telehealth solution, medical diagnoses. And we would be asking, have we thought that through? Is that the right call? So something like GPT, it is a huge language model. It's trained on trillions of data points, and that makes it really, really good at providing something like ChatGPT, which you can, as Asa mentioned, it's kind of genius level at almost genius level at everything. and it can provide a decent answer to basically any question that you have. Because it's so huge and because it can provide decent answers to every question, the risk of hallucination is higher because there's just so much that could go wrong. It's a generalist. Is that the correct language model to be using for medical diagnosis, where actually you only need to be trained on the corpus of medical information? Possibly not. And there are providers, and we've heard from other speakers today, there are a whole bunch of providers, a whole lot of different LLMs that are geared towards specific use cases. So one of the things that we'd want to be doing is making sure that in our due diligence process, we haven't just gone for the first shiny thing that we can see, that we've actually understood what's out there in the market that's more specific to our solution. It may well be that a smaller language model designed specifically for medical diagnosis is the way to go. And then in terms of, I guess, the different types of models and AI tools, we've heard about that quite a lot today. So you've got kind of at one end of the spectrum your public tools, ChatGPT. Anyone can go on. Whatever I put into there, I'm not really sure where it's going to go, but I can be pretty confident that, in fact, that information is being used to train the tool. Enterprise solutions, on the flip side, are more likely to be able to toggle on and off in terms of whether it's training on your data or not. So that's, I guess, the difference between, say, ChatGPT and the OpenAI sort of API enterprise tool, where you can kind of plug in to their LLM, but you can configure how much you want it to train on your data or not, versus a private tool. And that's, I think, where, again, we've heard today, it's all within your walled garden. Actually, the prompts that you're using are not being sent out to train the model. We've heard from Microsoft that their Copilot tool is, because they presented to us recently actually as lawyers, they're keen to get lawyers to use that tool, but also know that we're extremely risk averse on this sort of stuff. So one of the things that they do is with Copilot, when you put a prompt in and they send it out to the LLM to fulfill whatever it is you've asked, that prompt is tokenized, so it's not training the model at all, and you can be sure that whatever you do within Copilot is within your instance of Microsoft 365. So different tools will be appropriate for different purposes, but it's really important that you understand the nature of those tools and the terms and conditions that apply to each one of them. And then the last thing there is third-party risk. And so what we see a lot of as lawyers is clients who will be working with third-party providers who are using AI tools. And so a good example, which we've got with Heal Me here, is we want to do a marketing campaign. We've got an ad agency that we always use, and they're going to be creating content with using AI. Generally, you might have had a contract with the ad agency which says, we, the ad agency, will make sure that the stuff that we produce for you doesn't infringe anyone else's IP and is good to go. We'll review it and make sure that it's totally fine from a legal perspective before you publish it. When you add an AI provider into the mix, their terms might say, well, we don't give you any of those sorts of protections because it's AI and we're not prepared to do that. So I, as the client, need to understand who's providing protection and who isn't. So is my agency still able to stand behind that AI product in the same way as they would if they'd kind of created the images themselves? Possibly not. And what does each set of terms say about that? So it's just understanding who's using AI in that mix and what terms and what protections actually attach to it. So yeah, there's some due diligence that you need to do around the people that you're using, the tools that you're using. Okay, governance. This is an issue that we get talked or asked about a lot, and that's really about that balance that Asa was talking about between risk and reward. So there's absolutely a risk of not doing anything, and we've seen kind of the full spectrum of approaches to AI, from outright banning through to kind of full-scale incorporation into your business model, and like everything in between. And there's no right or wrong answer to that. It's what works for your business. But what you do need to do is kind of think proactively about how you are going to use AI and what systems and processes are you going to put in place to make that happen. And I think one of the key questions, and I would say this is like the minimum, bare minimum that everyone should be doing, is asking yourself, is AI enough of a change to our business that we need to do something new in this space? So we need to create a new AI policy or a new AI framework, or can we fit our use of AI within our existing policies and processes? And it's a similar question actually to the ones that governments are facing at the moment, in terms of, do we need to have regulation of AI, like a new AI Act like Europe, or can we actually fit regulation of AI within existing laws like the Privacy Act? And the New Zealand government's actually just produced a paper which is very much in the latter camp, so let's just deal with it, what we have, which makes a lot of sense because we're a tiny country and we don't really necessarily want to be leading the way on AI regulation. But it's a very similar mindset in the business world. It's like, how are we as a company going to address AI, and do we have the tools and systems in place already, maybe with just a few tweaks to allow us to kind of roll out AI responsibly in the business? So you might be looking at things like your IT security policies, data and privacy, technology procurement, customer care, even your sort of organisational values. Is there enough in there already that you can kind of tweak to fit your use of AI, or do you need a firm-wide specific AI policy? And I guess in terms of the mindset and the thinking around what that might look like, the framework that lots of people talk about, and I think it was mentioned this morning, is responsible AI. That's really the mantra that we're hearing a lot from people in this space. So, and that's things like thinking about who within your organisation is responsible for defining what responsible use of AI means for your company. And then I think it's really important to take a kind of a principles-based approach to this stuff. So there's lots of good frameworks out there for looking at this stuff. You don't have to start from scratch. You could chuck a few prompts into AI tools, no doubt. But OECD's got a good principles-based framework for responsible AI. Go out there, have a look, put some stuff into ChatGPT, see what you can find. Another really key concept is transparency. So, you know, and that's really critical about being clear and transparent, both internally and then with your customers, about how you're using AI. And there's been a great example of the Herald recently not doing that with the sports editorials, which were in fact written by AI. They didn't tell people, and now they're having a bit of a publicity nightmare because of it. So transparency is I think one of the core foundations. What goes along with that is explainability. So, you know, if your AI operates in a black box, you can't explain how it's kind of making those decisions or outputting that content, then you're in a tricky spot, particularly if there are legal issues that flow off the back of that. And in the Heal Me example, I guess, you know, super important that you can actually look a patient in the eye and tell them how you've come to that diagnosis. So if you can't explain it, you're in trouble, and you need to get someone into the business who can. And just a kind of, I guess, an example of governance in action. So we as a firm recently put in place our own generative AI policy. So we did that stock take of our existing policies and procedures, and we decided that actually, Gen AI does have the potential to be quite a game changer in the legal space. We saw some of that in some of the videos earlier. And we didn't necessarily have a policy or a process or a way of working that dealt with it sufficiently, we thought. So we drafted our own generative AI policy. You can find the full version on our website. We published it actually, which we couldn't find many other law firms that had done that, but we thought in terms of just a bit of thought leadership around AI, given we're advising a lot in this space, it would be good to just show people, an example of how that can work. And look, as a business, we're relatively straightforward from this perspective. We have a narrow set of services that we provide, and a relatively small workforce, mainly made up of just one type of worker. But still, it's really important for us and our clients to have that transparency, and also for our people to understand, how our expectations as the partners around how we're going to be using AI, and also have it as a living document that can, that can work going forward. And just working through those, so obviously it's kind of the four key issues that we've sort of been talking about today, and everyone's touched on really in their presentations. Incorporating confidential, sensitive personal information into an AI tool or a large language model that doesn't give you the protection that you need is a definite no-no. Checking the outputs, obviously very important for lawyers in particular, but really everyone, right? Like that human in the loop is still super important. Transparency, and that's partly why we published our Gen AI policy, because we want our clients to understand how we're going to be using AI. And then that last one, I think, is, I had a hand in drafting this policy, and this was a really important one to me, and that is communicating in our own voice. So a lot of these tools, they actually write really well, or they create amazing images, or do a whole bunch of stuff that looks fantastic, but it's impersonal, right? And we don't want to lose that human connection, certainly as lawyers, and there's a whole lot of industries that really benefit from that human touch, and we want to make sure that we retain that. So that was a whirlwind tour through some of the legal issues. Very happy to kind of delve into any more of that in detail, whether it's today or feel free to give us a call offline. My details are up there, and it's really a great opportunity to come and spend some time in this lovely part of the world. So thanks for having me, and enjoy lunch.